process. And so therefore, I think with some of us, I can agree that Rio was maybe not that big a failure. But I think we have to move forward, and that's very important. That was many people have mentioned. And I think going forward is maybe some reforms in the way of multilateral summits on the medium term, and some in the spirit of the young radical Oren, also in the long term. I think in the short term, I think what's important is what Peter, I think, mentioned, an independent secretary is very important to better structure the agenda. And some more maybe radical ideas that we have also outlined in the policy assessment from the Earth System Governance Project, also in line with what Karen Heike said, give more formalized, stronger input for different voices outside the state system. And this can be a more formalized input from civil society organizations. Don't put them in a separate room and have them discussed on their side events, but try to give them rights in a way that they can also shape the agendas. It doesn't mean full voting rights or whatever, so it means more rights to shape agendas and to prevent these agendas, as Oren said, from looking backwards, but to make these agendas looking forward. Of course, this raises lots of problems of accountability, legitimacy of these organizations themselves, but I think this is one of the frontiers for us as researchers to develop these kind of systems, and there are lots of discussions. We had a great discussion in Lund with John Dreisig, the deliberative democracy idea, and then some guys who are in favor of the World Parliamentarian Assembly, and the others who think about a representative system for civil society organizations. Lots of ideas, and we should kind of investigate and explore these ideas. In the same way, Karen mentioned the lack of mentioning of the environment. I think we need more formalized and stronger systems of including scientific advice in these systems, not only having Johan Bergström giving one talk, but giving also the scientific community a more formalized, institutionalized input in the agenda setting process. And there were lots of ideas out there. I mean, some of the more crazy ideas. I mean, this idea of a planetary ecologist that's come from the natural science community is maybe kind of too crazy to think about. But I mean, there may be some others, more modest and more implementable ways of bringing in scientific advice into these negotiations and summits to get the agenda forward. Coming to the radical young ideas, I think this is one thing that was an outcome of our Earth System Governance assessment, was the idea of a constitutional moment. And that's why we were extremely hooked up on this idea when it came up. We didn't really know what it means. We still don't mean whether we have a constitutional moment, whether we need a constitutional moment. But we started to think of this very long timelines in a way, and Oren mentioned whatever, 1648 and 1945, whatever, so these very long timelines, and we felt that we're certainly at a moment in time where either we have or we need such a moment where we have a total reconsideration of the way how the state system is configured at the global level, and especially in the field of planetary stewardship, STEM development, and Earth System governance. And well, the Rio Summit was certainly not living up to these ideas of a constitutional moment, but I think to add and to end also my little comment on a more positive note, I think maybe if we are very positive and we have a good meeting and good years, whatever, so we could see maybe seeds of transformation. And the seeds could be these two institutional little reforms that we have. The one is the universal membership. And I had a workshop retreat with Achim Stein and others from UNEP, and they want to turn this universal membership into this idea of a World Environment Assembly, which is of course not a big thing, but there's an idea of kind of taking this little ball that has been played by the states into their court and to kind of take this mandate and blow it up to make something bigger out of it. You don't know whether it happens. Maybe some of us see many reasons why it will never happen, but there's kind of a chance to build this up into something bigger. And the second seed of a transformation, potential transformation, is maybe this idea of this high-level forum. And we have argued for a much bigger reform. CSD is maybe not abolished, but has maybe the idea to upgrade it maybe. We wanted to have this much larger Sustainable Development Council, the UN system. It's not there, but maybe this idea, which is very undefined, of some type of high-level sustainable development forum could be a seat where political will, strong pressure from civil society and from the scientific community can lead in the end to something more positive. I don't know whether this will happen, but I think this is important to continue this discussion in this spirit, and I hope also to engage all of you in these discussions on what to do exactly. Thanks.
Certainly not going to disagree with Frank on any of this. I think that the underlying question that everybody was asking was, did Rio Plus 20 do enough to amplify pressures on governments and people to promote change to a more sustainable set of practices? You know, and there's sort of some inchoate things that might do that, but I'm skeptical still based on two grounds. One is the social science analytic perspective that, you know, think of the counterfactual. If we hadn't held Rio plus 20, where would we be? I don't think it'd be that different. And the second is the normative one of where are we at? I mean, just as an aside on Karen, I hate cloud analysis as a methodology because it makes the same mistake that content analysis always did, which is you're counting the frequency of words, but you have nothing to say about what those words mean. And, you know, which harkens to the same question about participation. And there's a big difference between participation and governing. It's who gets to sit in the room and who makes the decisions. And I still want to focus attention on who's making those decisions, not what is the justificatory discourse in which prior interests are being expressed and who's making the choices. All right. Now, that leads directly into questions about sovereignty, right? Because you got the notion that either as a practice, sovereignty rests decisions in the hands of governments who really, at the end of the day, aren't subject to any of these pressures. At the margin, they have to listen to all of this, but they don't have to hear. And you know, I mean, so the claim is we need to change sovereignty. I think that's right, and the corollary is that sovereignty is changing as a consequence of all of these meetings. I think that's right. Sovereignty is changing because the practices that governments have been following over the last 40 years increasingly recognize an obligation to other countries. There is emergent planetary stewardship out of a recognition of policy and ecological change. You know, I mean, that's a real change. But back to the original question, the $64,000 question is that change, or to what extent is that change in sovereignty due to conference diplomacy and global symmetry? And, you know, I'm out of time. The answer is in part because global symmetry amplifies other pressures. And the second question is, what is the way to change or advance the assault on sovereignty? And there are two approaches, right? One is you attack it directly through normative discourses about sovereignty. That happened in 1648. I haven't seen it happening since. The second approach is change in practices by stealth, which is what the application of the science of ecology is supposed to do. It changes understanding about the consequences of exercising sovereignty, leading to changes in the practice of sovereignty without fundamentally changing the legal definition of sovereignty itself.
Thank you, Peter. Gordon, $64,000 question.
Gosh, I was thinking of millions or trillions.
Yes, I think so.
Time is short. Let me make one set of comments.